All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2022. This is day, what is it today? 30. This is the second to last day, guys. So today, I am going to get right to the point. I'm going to do something rather stupid. I'm actually going to tag the person using this newfangled YouTube tagging system that I am going to refute in this video. If you have read the title, you may realize we are going to be getting into some scandalous topics. But I promise this is not meant to start some sort of turf war or anything. This is something that I've been seeing in the D&D community in general that happens in literally every other community. And my personal experience of it is it happening in business. And that is taking a good thing and turning it into a deity. So, what am I talking about? Well, let's talk about the Session Zero. Dungeon Dudes just released a video that was entitled, I'm going to look it up because I'm going to 100% forget the title of it. But it's about red flags in D&D campaigns. Basically, if you're joining a new D&D campaign, these are red flags to look out for. And again, before... Oh, there it is. It's literally I literally just... I stopped watching it so I could record this because I'm this passionate about it. The title of it by Dungeon Dudes is 10 Big Red Flags When Joining a D&D Group. So, this is something that's become significantly more popular as things like RPG horror stories have become really, really popular. And people are like, well, I don't want to experience a horror story. How can I avoid things like this? We see red flag stuff all the time about D&D. And even when a lot of content creators that I watch that specialize and focus on RPG horror stories will mention red flags as they're reading the horror stories. Red flags by themselves are not a bad thing, but their first red flag, and I'm actually going to bring up the video here so because I don't want to misquote them, because first of all, Dungeon Dudes, I have the utmost respect for. By the way, Dungeon Dudes, if you guys are watching this, first things first, make better life choices, because there are much better things you could be doing with your time than listening to me talk about nonsense. But if you are watching, sincerely thank you. And I would love to actually have a real conversation with you about this, maybe on a podcast, maybe on a Twitch stream, maybe for one of your videos. I would absolutely love to have an actual conversation instead of me just talking at you guys about something I disagree about. But anyway, so in this video, I guess it's the second one because they have the intro, they have group dynamics, and then their big thing is no session zero. And I have seen this over and over and over again. People talking about the importance of a session zero, people talking about how to run a proper session zero. The Dungeon Dudes themselves actually have a video that they have a card for in this video where they talk about a proper way to run a session zero, and we just hear session zero, session zero, session zero, session zero, session zero, session zero. And I am here to tell you, as someone with thousands of hours of DMing experience that has run multiple multi-year long campaigns, a session zero is a good idea, but it is not necessary. It is not nearly as important as people think it is. And the thing that made me want to record this video was the idea, and the Dungeon Dudes actually say this in their video. The session zero is the number one red flag that a bad campaign is going to start. It's not. 100% it's not. And they actually make a comparison that I would make myself, because anyone that watches this channel for any amount of time knows my background when I could work. I was in business. I was in retail management in sales, and my particular specialty was in team development, staffing, and sales training. Those are the things that I did the best. And by the best, I mean I was the single best trainer in the company that I worked for. And it was a international retail chain outlet. Now, did I get any awards or anything like that? Or did I get acknowledged as, oh, this person's the absolute... No, it never actually happened. However, I took the busiest store in the busiest district of the company, and I took it from dead last in sales to top 3 in 6 months through nothing other than my sales training techniques and some modifications to how they did staffing. That's not something... And I was not the store manager of that store. I was the lowest level manager. So without any authority... without any of the tools, like I wasn't allowed to hire anyone, I wasn't allowed to fire anyone, I wasn't allowed to write up anyone on my own. I had to have someone else do that. So without any of the authority to do it, I went and changed a multi-million-dollar store from massively unprofitable to one of the most profitable in one of the most one of the busiest districts in the company. I know what I'm talking about. After doing that, I went to work for a couple other cookie companies, did very, very well, but unfortunately my mental health declined to the point where now I'm 100% permanently and totally disabled. And during that period, I also went and got a degree in business. My particular degree is a Bachelor of Science in Business Marketing Management, which is a combination marketing and project management degree. So now you know kind of my history. They make reference to the session 0 being the way, comparing it effectively to hiring a new person. There's actually a term for that in business. Bringing a new person onto your workforce is called onboarding. Onboarding is actually an incredibly well-studied field in business. And it's something that some businesses will put a large emphasis on, a lot of businesses will put a small emphasis on, and a few businesses that close very quickly will put no emphasis on. Onboarding is an extremely, extremely important process. And onboarding is not a session 0 in any way, shape, or form, especially the session 0 that the Dungeon Dudes describe. The way... Now, I'm also, to just be 100% completely transparent, I have not watched the rest of the video. I specifically watched the entire section on that's labeled No Session 0 just to ensure that I wasn't misunderstanding what they were saying about Session 0. So if later on in the video they make corrections or anything like that, I haven't watched the video. And it's not because I don't think the video is good or again, I don't respect them or anything like that. I do. I think they're wonderful, amazing people. My issue is my anxiety and depression is real bad today. And so I have not been able to watch anything to completion right now because my brain doesn't like me. And it's easier for me to talk than it is for me to passively intake videos and things like that. So the session 0 that they describe is everybody sits down and everybody gets a chance to talk. And the DM talks about, basically what the campaign's going to be like, and people can start talking about their different character ideas, and it's a very collaborative process. Now, if you guys watched my Power Rangers RPG mini campaign that I ran over this past month, the last Wednesday of November, we ran a session 0, and it actually ran very close to how the Dungeon Dudes describe a session 0. I got everyone there. We talked about the game. I actually taught the system while we were doing the session 0, which for me was the big reason I did that particular session 0, was no one in the party had ever played the Power Rangers RPG. I don't believe any of them actually had even looked at the book at that point. So I decided that would be the best way to get them in. And they did talk about characters, and because of how the Power Rangers RPG is built, because you can't have two characters that are the same role per the rules, it kind of necessitated them talking together and kind of picking which role each one was going to have. So I'm not saying that the session zero that they're describing is somehow bad. It's not. And it can be a very useful tool for a very specific kind of game, which is perfectly fine. But that's not an onboarding process. Again, my specialty in business was part of it was staffing and training, which involves onboarding. I was, I think, for almost every job I had in management, I was the person that did onboarding. Whether or not it was part of my job description, 9 times out of 10 it wasn't, because there's also a really, really good salesman. And so even in a management position, my, like most of the management positions I held were sales manager. And I was expected, in addition to running sales, I was expected to sell things myself, which can be good. The store that was most profitable when I was running sales, I did not make almost any sales in it by the time it was profitable, because I spent all of my time developing my team. And I was allowed to do that at that store. I wasn't allowed to do that at other stores, and they didn't do as well because they didn't let me do that. But the onboarding process is not a dialogue. An onboarding process that is a dialogue with a new person and then the entire group is a remarkably bad onboarding process. Because 9 times out of 10, the other employees or crew members or whatever you want to call them are going to make your ability to onboard a new employee significantly more difficult, because they're going to flood them with information that they don't need, and they are going to try and make your onboarding process all about them instead of the new employee. The reason I know this is because I've seen it done. I've seen it done quite a few times, generally by people with MBAs, because that's the kind of stuff that they teach in business school. And as someone that went to business school, I can tell you 90% of the stuff they teach in business school is completely worthless. My degree is barely worth the paper it was printed on. And I got a degree from a really great university. I'm an alum of Western Governors University. They were actually singled out by President Obama because of their, I think it's called competency-based learning, where instead of you taking a test to prove that you read the book, every time you take a course, it will have specific competencies, specific things that you should be able to do by the end of the course. And they're not tied to the book, they're tied to, if you got a job in this field, you should be able to do these things. Like one of them might be, you'll be able to create a staffing model. Or another one might be, you'll be able to create a supply-demand curve to analyze the sales of a certain thing. All these things are things that you actually do in business. And despite the fact that it was a competency-based system, which is one of the better systems out there in our rather broken education system, 90% of what I learned was useless because it was written by people who had degrees but no experience. A lot of them were like people with MBAs or doctorates in some sort of business. Fun fact, if you have a doctorate in business, that is a theoretical degree. Most doctorates outside of things like medicine are what are called theoretical degrees, where you don't learn anything quote-unquote practical to get your doctorate. Your doctorate makes you an expert on subject matter, but not a professional expert. Generally, master's degree is where you stop learning things that you can implement real time in the workforce and you start going into the theoretical, economic theory, things like that. Those are the kinds of doctors, which is why most business people tend to stop at an MBA. MBA is Master of Business Arts, by the way, or Master of Business Administration. I'm sorry. So anyway, a good onboarding in a business setting is somewhat of a dialogue, but it is a very one-sided dialogue that is extremely controlled, because when you are bringing someone into a new job, even something as simple as running a cash register is massively complicated when you put into practice the fact that you have to deal with actual human beings. Human beings screw up everything. There is not a single thing that humans have not found a way to screw up, break, pervert, whatever. And so teaching someone how to deal with human beings in a volatile environment like retail is a nightmare. So a proper onboarding experience involves getting your new associate, whether it's one or a few or 100, however you're doing it, you need to get them into as small a group as possible so that you can individually address them. And then you need to start at the beginning and go piecemeal, step by step, showing them the basics, the fundamentals of how whatever their job is works. So if I'm hiring a cashier, what I do is I bring them in and I start with a tour of the store. Not because I'm expecting them to go around the store, but they're going to see products from every part of the store. And so by physically taking them to the product, they start to get familiar with the environment that they're in, and they can start physically seeing the things that they're going to see up front. And I will always customize it for them. By the way, if you see a printer coming up, someone didn't do their job. Because you should not be selling printers. Printers are high attachment items. I have salesmen that sell those. If somebody brings up a printer, I will teach you a very quick pitch about how to attach things to it. But by the time they get to you, if they've got to you and they have a printer in their hand, somebody on the floor has done their job poorly. And if you do not get the attachments that we intend, it is not your fault. That is not your job. And those are the kind of things that I would tell them. I'd go around, okay, these are calculators. We sell about 400 bazillion of them during back to school season, and they're an absolute nightmare. The thing that you need to know personally is if a customer comes up and they ask you or say something about, well, I don't know if this is the right one for my kid. If they're a high schooler, it is this one. It is the TI-83 or the TI-83 Plus. If they're taking calculus, it is this one. Every other kid, it is this one. These are the only 3 calculators you ever need to recommend. If they have anything else, all you have to say is, well, my understanding is this is the one that they tend to prefer. And every school will particularly list this one. If you can't tell, I worked at an office supply chain. So that's what I do. You start with the basics. This is the store. This is the environment you're going to go in. And then I take them to a register that is closed. I have someone else actually checking out customers because I don't want my new employee interacting with customers. They're going to break everything. And we show them the basics of how the register works. Okay, this is how you sign on. This is how you sign off. Every time you step away from the register, you sign off. So now I want you to sign in. Okay, now let's go over here, and I'll take them to a different register. I want you to sign in here. Well, it won't let me. Really? Well, that's strange. Why don't you think it'll let you? Oh, I don't. No. Did you sign off of the other one? Well, no. What did I tell you? 2 minutes ago. Always sign off when you step away. Oh, that's good. This is why we do this. Failure is wonderful. Failure is the best teacher you ever have. Never, ever, ever get mad at failure. Failure is fantastic in training. Encourage failure. Create environments where your trainees can fail repeatedly without hurting anyone, exactly like I just described. And it would go on from there. And you always start with the basics. This is how the basics of this works. And after they are comfortable, they have mastered that, then you can start going, okay, these are customers. There is no basics for customers. No customer is ever going to work the way we think they should. You want to know why? Because they're human. And humans have this great ability to just never do the thing that we expect them to do. So these are common things that you will hear. You don't have to memorize these. You will learn them just from doing them enough. And anytime you are having problems, the store that I worked in had a headset system. Anytime you are having problems, we had our mics right here and they had a little button on them. So I go, you just go on the headset and call me over or call, and I would always generally try to have at least one person around that, or you can call this person that tends to be not only familiar with how things work, but understands my training methods. That is an onboarding process. Does that sound like what happens in a session zero? No, because it isn't. Onboarding is a completely different process, and most businesses do it poorly. I know this because I worked for a lot of them, and I have worked with other managers that have worked for a shit ton more. Another thing that a lot of people are not aware of, specifically in retail in general, most managers know each other at least by like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. The way you get more money and the way you get pay raises in retail is not by staying with the same company for 20 years. Generally, you don't get more than 1 or 2 raises once you become like a assistant store manager or store manager. You just don't. So the way that you get more money is you go to a different company and they pay you more. And I knew quite a few managers that bounced between 3 or 4 different companies, like 2 or 3 times each. And that's how they got their raises, because if you stay in one company, you just never do. But that also means that most managers know most of their competitors. It's just, it's how it works. And those of us that don't personally know each other, you develop this kind of war buddy thing where you go, oh yeah, I'm a manager, blah, blah. And then you instantly have a bond. So anyway, going back to session zeros. Like I said, I have run a session zero a month ago. I'm not saying session zeros are bad. I'm saying we have deified this idea of a session zero to the point where the dungeon dudes are saying, well, this is the biggest red flag because this red flag can get rid of every other red flag that we have. And I'll read the ones that they have here. I'm not going to go into specifics because, again, I haven't watched the whole video. But these are the other ones that they talk about. Joining an established campaign, long list of banned options, shutting down optimization, surprise house rules, told what to play, no information about setting, last-minute dropouts, table vibe, and inappropriate behavior. All of those things are red flags. Can all of them be completely gotten rid of with a session zero? Absolutely not. Specifically, surprise. Again, I haven't watched the rest of this, so it's possible they've already said this. Dungeon Dudes, I sincerely apologize for not watching the entirety of the video. Again, depression and anxiety are not fun to deal with, especially when you can't be medicated for them. So, surprise house rules by definition can't be solved with a session zero because they are surprise. They just randomly happen. By the way, I will put surprise house rules into my games. I made a surprise house rule in my Power Rangers RPG just in the heat of the moment. You want to know what it was? In the Essence 20 system, you can use story points to reroll natural ones. My group apparently was rolling d20s that didn't have double digits on them. They could not roll above a 7. Over and over and over again, but they never rolled ones. So what did I do? I said, you know what? You can use story points to re-roll anything. If you want to burn a story point, I will let you re-roll whatever die you want. That was a surprise house rule that just came out of nowhere. We didn't discuss it in fact, specifically in our session zero. I told them you can only use story points to re-roll nat ones. I believe on the D20, but no, I think it might be any nat one, but specifically I mentioned the D20. Because that's the only way you can get a fumble in the Essence 20 system is rolling a nat 1 on the d20. Your skill dice don't matter for fumbles. Yeah, the idea of session 0 is going to get rid of surprise house rolls. Doesn't. Inappropriate behavior? No. No, there are a lot of people I know that had very, very inappropriate behavior that had a session 0. That played for 5 years without any problems and then just magically started doing things that were totally not okay. Doesn't stop that. Table vibe, you might be able to get that in a session 0, you might not. In the same way that during your interview, you will not get a good idea of how the company runs and how the company feels, unless you are really, really knowledgeable about how businesses work. Um, I generally can get a pretty good vibe of a business from an interview. But again, I am 100% an outlier. Um, I One of the ways I got one of my management positions was I came to an interview for a retail outlet, and I came to it about a half an hour early, and I just walked around the store and watched the customers, and I looked at a few prices, and I went into the interview and I told them what their sales goals were without seeing any of their P&L reports, without looking at a single register total, nothing. I said, you guys probably do what, 150, 200 transactions a day? And the district manager, whose office was in this particular building, but he ran the entire district, just looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, yeah. I said, what, your average ticket is what, 15, 8, average ticket goal somewhere between 15 and 18 bucks? And he looks at me again, he's like, yeah, how did you know that? I said, I looked around, I watched the customers going through. I looked at the price of your items, and I just did a little math. Like, math is my thing, by the way. That's just what I do. The funny thing was, the district manager that was hiring me for this particular position was the store manager that hired me for my previous job. He had taken a job as a district manager, and I still blew his mind when I just came in and said, yeah, this is how your store works, and you probably have this many shifts. And I just described, and I'd never been in this store before. I didn't shop at this particular, I didn't shop at this particular chain at all. It just wasn't something that I did. And he was blown away because I just looked around, because that's what I can do. I'm weird. I'm a freak because I can do that. Most people can't. So the idea of getting your table vibe from a session zero, yeah, you can get a little bit of a vibe from it. But it's going to change and through. And then everything else, shutting down optimization, won't happen at a table zero or a session zero. Table zero, my lord. Told what to play, that might happen at a session zero, but it's just as easily can happen afterwards. Again, I'm not saying session zeros are useless. They're a remarkably useful tool, but that is what they are. They are just a tool. They are a hammer. And while, yes, hammers have a lot of uses, there's a lot of things a hammer can't do. If you try to build a house with just a hammer, your house is going to fall down. You need a lot of other things. You need pipe cutters to be able to cut and form your different pipes. You need screwdrivers or drills and things like that. You need a lot of different things. Can you try to build a house with just a hammer? Absolutely. I've seen people try it. Doesn't work well. There are a lot of clubhouses that were built exclusively using hammers. They don't last long. Yes. And the bigger point I wanted to make about this is we have this tendency when someone finds something useful to turn it into this deific, holy thing that is completely beyond reproach. The best example of this is something that I sincerely despise, because I will continually say it's not a real thing. But here I'm going to admit its existence: the Critical Role effect. Now, 90% of the people that complain about the Critical Role effect are just people that are angry that Critical Role is more popular than them. And I've done quite a few different videos that talk about, like I had one that talked about every 6 months on the dot from 2015 up until I think about 2020 was the last time I saw every 6 months. A different channel will talk about how Critical Role is ruining YouTube. And you could set your watch by it. It was impressive. Or not ruining YouTube, they were ruining D&D. It's not. However, the idea of Critical Role is the pinnacle of role-playing is kind of the exact same thing that Session Zero is becoming. It's Session Zero is the be-all, end-all. If you do a Session Zero, your game will work. And anytime your Session Zero doesn't make your game perfect, it's because you did the Session Zero wrong, not because the Session Zero didn't help. And again, this is kind of implied by the Dungeon Dudes because they specifically say, by the way, we have this video to teach you how to do a Session Zero. I haven't watched that video yet. I am sure it is very good advice. There's very few things I've watched of the Dungeon Dudes where they're saying blatantly false things. And this in itself is not a blatantly false thing. Again, a lot of the things they are talking about are true. You know, again, shutting down optimization is a red flag that your D&D game may not be a game that you want to be a part of. No information about setting is a red flag. Inappropriate behavior isn't a red flag. Inappropriate behavior is just nope. But by the time you are observing inappropriate behavior, it's done. This is no longer a red flag. A red flag is a warning that you should take, at least in this particular instance. They're talking about a red flag is a warning that you should observe that maybe something's inappropriate behavior is past the red flag. Inappropriate behavior is, okay, we fucked up. So that being said, so yeah, like I said, Session Zero, it is not a bad thing. It is not the perfect thing. And my justification and my kind of quote unquote proof of this is, again, I mentioned before, I have thousands of hours of DMing experience. Back in, I don't know, like 2018, 2019, I think it was, when I was thinking about trying to become a quote unquote professional GM. I actually calculated how much time I had spent behind the DM screen. And at that point, I think I was in the neighborhood of between 2,000 and 3,000 hours. And I had been running D&D since I think 2013, 2014 is when I started running D&D. My first game, I believe, was in 2014 that I ran. So a lot of people go, well, we've been playing for 20 years. We've been playing for 30 years. Again, I live in Wisconsin, so I have literally spoken to people that can brag truthfully. I played with Gygax. I will say the people that offer that information without prompting generally are not people I enjoy having at my table. However, the people that it comes up in conversation just casually, oh yeah, I remember I played with Gary Gygax. Those are the coolest people ever, guys. They're really, really awesome people. So anyway, yeah, a lot of people will instantly try to discount what I'm saying is, oh, well, you just don't understand. You're too young. You're a baby DM. No, like I said, back then I had between about 2,000 to 3,000 hours. At this point, I think I can safely say I'm in the realm of upper 3,000s to 4,000 hours. Why? Because I am currently running 3 different campaigns. I run every Wednesday night. I run D&D, and then every other Saturday I run Open Legend. And when I was cutting my teeth as a DM, I did what I called the convention circuit. In Wisconsin, we have a shit ton of tabletop conventions. Tons and tons and tons of them. I used to do between 6 and 8 a year. And I was also a local coordinator for the D&D Adventurers League. And I'm still there are no longer local coordinators. They got rid of that entire thing because the regional coordinators were bastards. For the most part. There were some good ones. But a lot of them were just power-hungry jackasses. And I have stories of just horrible, horrible things that they did. But anyway. Yeah, they... so I know this because currently I am running one campaign that has been running for around 5 years. My Saturday campaign, we had our 5-year anniversary this past September. The other campaign I'm running is going on, I think, 2 years, and the one that ended before that went close to 6 or 7 years. I run long-term campaigns, and I'm pretty damn good at it. I didn't have a single Session Zero for any of them. And I've had people that unfortunately had to leave my campaigns due to, like, for example, I had someone in one of my campaigns that left because they had gone from being a college student, specifically a nursing student, to being a nurse. And if anyone is even mildly familiar with what nursing is like, free time kind of goes away when you become a nurse. And so they had to drop out. But they told me point blank, this they'd been playing for years, and they go, this is my favorite character I have ever played. And we specifically wrote into, like, we created, they told me like a couple weeks ahead of time, they're like, hey, I'm gonna have to drop out. I said, okay, well, let's find out what's gonna happen to your character. Let's come up with an actual reason for your character to leave. And the way that we wrote in for their character to leave, I specifically wrote in so that, hey, when we start getting to the end of this campaign, because we were already pretty close, I said, when we get to the last few episodes, I'm going to give you a call and go, hey, by the way, we're getting to the last few episodes. Do you want to bring your character back so that they can finish this? And at that point, they were really, really interested in it. Now, I think it's been over a year since then, because my campaigns go for a while. But, yeah, so I know what I'm doing. And again, what I used to do in the convention circuit is I would spend a 4-day weekend doing nothing but Dungeons and Dragons, primarily running Dungeons and Dragons. And we never had even a quick Session Zero at anyone. Now, these were all Adventurers League games, so the Adventurers League in itself kind of has a Session Zero built into it, just because you'll get a little document that says this is what you can and can't do. But as the Dungeon Dudes specifically say at the end of their section, an email, a document or something does not replace a Session Zero. I heartily disagree. And I have lots of proof for it. Again, I would spend, on a 4-day weekend, we would start running D&D generally between about 8 to 8:30 a.m., and we would run D&D until generally between about 11 o'clock and 1 a.m. And there would be, maybe a half-hour break between sessions, and that was it. And like an hour for lunch. So I would be from 8 a.m. till, to use an easy number, 8 a.m. to midnight. So that's 16 hours a day. I would do nothing but D&D. Primarily running, because the way that I could go to these conventions, because I was poor, was I ran games for them. Most conventions, and it depends on the convention, most conventions, if you run enough games for them, will give you not only a free ticket to the convention, but they will also give you free room and board, which is really, really nice. So you will be sharing a hotel room with at least 2 to 3 other people, but it's a free hotel room for a weekend. It's really useful and nice. So yeah, I generally, over a weekend, minimum, I would run 4 games. A lot of times I would run 6. I think the most I ever ran was 8 over a weekend. And then I would play, whenever I wasn't running, I was playing, or I had a convention that I actually ran all of their organized play stuff. So that was D&D Adventures League, Shadowrun Missions, and Pathfinder Society. I oversaw all of it. So for those instances, I was watching everyone else play and ensuring everything was working the way it was supposed to, and things like that. Yeah. I know what I'm talking about because I've seen this over and over again. Session Zeros are not a new thing. They have existed for probably as long as D&D has existed. Gary Gygax first pitching Dungeons and Dragons to his first group of players would technically be a Session Zero. So I'm not saying Session Zeros are new. I'm saying the type of Session Zero that the Dungeon Dudes are describing is relatively new. And as far as that, I mean, as people using it the way that they are describing, it is a relatively new thing. And the idea that it is the be-all, end-all of a good campaign is within the last couple years here. And again, I'm not saying that Session Zeros are bad in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying they are not this deific, ideal thing. And the idea that you can't replace a Session Zero with emails, every campaign I have run, I don't do a session 0 specifically because for to give you an example, the Power Rangers one, I did the session 0 partially because I needed to teach them how to play, and partially because they needed to be able to agree what classes to play, because you couldn't have two people that were the same class. Every other campaign I've run, I do one-on-one sessions with each of the players, generally through email, because it means that we don't have to be at the same place at the same time. And I do that specifically so that every player can have their own backstory that no one else in the group is aware of. And the player can choose how they want that backstory to be revealed for the most part. I will put aspects of their backstory into the story, but the player gets to kind of deal with that, and it becomes a much more dynamic process as the characters are learning about each other, the players are learning about each other as well, and it's an extremely effective method to create very interesting stories that hook players in really, really well. I am a very hands-on DM. When things go wrong, I will talk to players. That might be one of the reasons why I don't need a session 0. Because, again, from my experience in management, something that it takes a lot of managers a long time to learn is praise is always public. Anytime somebody does something good, you tell everybody. Correction is always private. You never publicly chastise someone unless you have absolutely no other choice. If they are currently doing something that could get them fired, could get someone else fired, could tank the business, whatever, that is the only time you publicly chastise anyone. Everything else, it's, hey, can I talk to you real quick in the manager's office? And everyone will start whispering and stuff like that. There's nothing you can do about that. But you do not chastise someone publicly, and you do not fix problem behavior with the whole group there. It just doesn't work. And again, I know a lot of people, I've read a lot of stories where they're like, oh no, I did this and it worked perfectly. No, it didn't. You shamed them into doing what you wanted to do. And shame, if shame was an effective motivator, there would be no fat people. Because, and this is coming from someone who is a fat person, and I've always been fat, and I've been shamed for my weight my entire life. I do not believe there is a single person that grew up fat that did not get bullied for it. Even if you were homeschooled, you found a way to get bullied for it. Shame is an incredibly bad motivator. So publicly chastising someone never works. Privately works significantly better. The other thing that most managers and most DMs in the same instance don't understand is nothing is personal. Even if it is personal, you cannot take it personally. I remember a specific incident in retail. It was late. Store was closed. We had to do what was calling setting ad. Basically, when the new ad dropped, all the new sales and stuff like that, we would get all of these stickers, and they were really, really annoying. But you had to go to every single sticker actually had the item that it's supposed to do, and if an item was in different parts of the store, you had to label every single facing of that item. You had to put this sticker on to show that it was on sale. And there was a specific way you had to do it. It was the amount of just nonsense that goes into putting up sale signs is bonkers. It is always a very long process. It generally requires whoever is closing the store to stay late. We got to the point where one of the employees who hated me, who had tried to get me fired on multiple occasions with false accusations of things that I won't talk about, to the employee tip line. Like, they did everything they could to try and get me fired. They hated me. We get to the end of the night. They are scheduled until 10 o'clock. We have maybe 15 minutes left of ad to set. Or we had enough ad that it would take us about 15 minutes set the rest of it if everyone stayed. And so here is here was a management tip that I was giving. If you ask someone, they can say no. If you order someone to do something, they can refuse. But if you just kind of go, hey, we're almost done here, why don't we just go ahead and do this? You just make a very casual reference to, hey, this is what's going to happen, and don't really direct it at them. A lot of times, people will agree to do that, and you don't have to specifically ask them, which creates legal problems as far as as far as like labor laws are concerned. And ordering someone to do something in any kind of business situation is just a dumb move. You don't have the ability to order anyone. Unless you are in the military, you cannot order anyone. You cannot say, I'm your boss, that's why you're just going to ruin your job. That's how it works. And so that's what I did. And I said, hey, we're almost done with this. If everybody stays for another 15 minutes, we can do that. This particular employee blew up. Started screaming at me, spitting at me because of how loud he was screaming at me, pointing fingers, calling me every name in the book. He was egging me on to hit him. He was specifically saying, put him up, come on, man, bring it on. For me, just saying, hey, we're almost done, if we all stay. And so as he is spewing all this hatred and filth at me, I stood next to the counter and I said, okay, that's perfectly all right. You do not have to stay. If you need to go, go. He didn't like that. He wanted me to fight. He wanted to provoke me into doing something so that he could get me fired. That was the entire purpose of this. And so he's just saying over and over, just screaming at me. I'm just going, okay, I understand. I'm not angry. You are bringing up valid points. It was merely a suggestion. You don't want to do it. That's perfectly fine. You can go home. Well, the problem with this particular employee was that they needed a ride home from another employee who wanted to stay. So I turned to that employee. I said, why don't you go ahead and take him home? And the other employee's like, no, I really want to. I said, hey, you're not in trouble. What's happening here, this is not okay. But we'll talk about this later. This is not the time to talk about it. You personally are not in trouble. There's nothing. You are doing absolutely the right thing right now. I sincerely appreciate it. But this particular employee needs to go home. You are their ride. Therefore, both of you can go. All right? You're not in trouble. I'm not angry with you at all. We will talk to at a later time, because right now you've told me you need to get home and you can go home. After they were pushed out the door to the point where I had to tell this employee, listen, you are no longer here. Like, I have told you to punch out. You need to punch out now, because you are no longer legally allowed to be inside this building. You are not currently working. So you need to leave before I have to escalate this to talking to either the higher-ups about possibly exploring your employment, or going to the police because you're officially trespassing. So you need to go. All right? Thank you. I really appreciate everything you've done, but you have to go now. So they got out. And I had a manager trainee that was learning, and another associate that should have been a manager, and eventually got promoted to a manager. And they both looked at me. He's like, how did you do that? I said, what? He was saying all those things and you were just so incredibly calm. I said, that's not the worst thing I've been called this week. Management is literally just getting shit on and getting paid really badly for it. Like, that's you. If you want to be a manager, you cannot take things personally. If you want to be a dungeon master, you cannot take things personally. And that's where a lot of D&D horror stories, that's where they come from, is people taking things personally. So going back to the Session Zero thing. By the way, Dungeon Dudes, if you're still watching this, again, better life choices. But this is what I tend to do. I ramble. Back to Session Zeros. Session Zeros are a useful tool for a very particular kind of game. However, you can run a completely wonderful, amazing multi-year long campaign or one shot without having a session zero. It is not the be all end all. It is not something that is necessary to have a good game. And everything, literally everything that you cover in a session zero can be put into an email chain. And I understand the point that you guys made where there's something different about talking to people, interacting with them. Absolutely, 100% you are right. Just because it is different does not mean it is impossible, though. And this is another thing that I've actually kind of called out Critical Role, despite the fact that they will never ever hear this criticism. But I've called out Critical Role in the past when the pandemic first hit, and they just stopped producing content, and they didn't start producing content again until they could all be in the same room again. And this is not something that I really enjoy using because it's overused and abused constantly, but that is an incredibly ableist thing. And this is particularly coming from someone who has multiple forms of anxiety, including social anxiety disorder, panic disorder with agoraphobia, and PTSD. Getting into a physical room with people is not something that I can do. And there are a lot of people that don't have anywhere near as extreme issues with it that I do that still don't play D&D or tabletop RPGs in general because they can't get into a physical room with people for a multitude of different reasons. The idea that the best D&D, in order to give you the best quality experience, because this was the justification for them, in order for us to give you the quality experience that you expect from us, we can only do this when we are all in the same room, is ableist and insulting. I have not run in-person D&D games in, 4, maybe 6 years at this point. And I've been running online D&D games for, I think about a decade now, as long as I've been running this channel. The idea that somehow online D&D is somehow a lesser form of it, or you can't have as much fun as you can in a room if you're in a room with someone, is a blatant lie. Is it different? Absolutely. Do you have to use different methods to get people involved? Absolutely. But the player I told you about that said this is the favorite character that he's ever built, they played in person and never had a connection like they had with this particular character. You just have to do it differently. And the same thing is true about session zero being an email instead of a meeting with everyone. Is it the same? No. Is a dialogue with someone, either a voice chat or a video chat, going to be different than having an email chain with them? Absolutely yes. Does that mean somehow one is better than the other? No. They are different, and you have to understand the differences in order to be able to use them. And again, the most useful thing you can learn is qualifying questions. Never assume that you and the person that are using the same term think the term means the same thing. Ask qualifying questions. When you say this is a high fantasy setting, what do you mean by that? Does high fantasy mean Forgotten Realms, Lord of the Rings, or Discworld? What do you mean by high fantasy? Are we talking Harry Potter? Like, different people have different ideas of what high fantasy is. And before people get mad at me, no, I would never define Harry Potter as high fantasy. However, some people might. So as a player or a DM, you do need to ask qualifying questions. You need to make yourself clear. This is another thing I learned in sales training. You cannot assume the customer has as much knowledge about the product as you do. They don't. You're paid to know more than they are. You cannot assume the customer has a base level knowledge of something, because remarkably enough, a lot of them don't. I worked in tech support for a number of years. The amount of times I had to go, okay, Have you tried turning it off? Well, yeah, I turned it off and then I turned it on and it's blue still. Okay, which button did you press? Well, I pushed the turn off button. You know, it goes black when I turn it off. Okay. Did you push the button on the monitor, or did you push the button on the CPU? What's a CPU? Did you push a button that's next to the picture, or did you push a button that's on a box somewhere that's connected by a cable to the? It looks like a TV. Oh, there's a box. Yeah, no, I don't touch that. My son told me never touch that. Okay. So what I need you to do is go to the box. And on the box, there should be a button that's lit up. Generally, it looks like a little, a lot of times it'll have like a little circle with like a line going through the bottom of it. Yeah, I see that. I want you to push that and hold it for a couple of seconds. Would stop making noise. And did I break it? No. Now I want you to wait for a solid minute. While we're waiting, is there other things that I can, talk to you about? Do you into Hamilton? By the way, when I was doing tech support, Hamilton wasn't even a fever dream. This is early, oh God, way back in like 2008, 2010 was when I was doing tech support. But, wait a little bit. Okay, now, just push the button. You don't have to hold it in. Just push the button once on the thing. Oh my God, you fixed it! Yeah, I know. If something like that happens again, or if anyone else ever asks you, did you try turning it off? If you push the button on the monitor, that's the thing that looks like the TV. All that does is it turns that off. It actually doesn't turn the computer off. The computer is still running. And if what you're saying is true, your computer has been running for 7 years. Every so often, it needs a break. Otherwise, it gets tired and it turns into a blue screen. So, yeah, at least once a week, your computer should be off as long as you are. So maybe Friday night, turn it off. Saturday, when you get it on, when you get up, turn it back on. So yes, even if someone comes into your Giga game that claims they have loads and loads of experience, they've played tons and tons of Giga campaigns. And they're very, very knowledgeable about D&D. And, normally I'm a min-maxer, but for you, I'm going to try and just do a more roleplay built character. You need to talk to them. You need to figure out what they think min-maxing means. You need to talk to them about the character that they're building. You need to see how they see their character fitting into their world. It's a very hands-on experience. Not a lot of people like doing this, but it's the reason I have games that run for years instead of weeks. I'm currently running, I think they're level 15 or 16 at this point. By the time they get to the end of the campaign, we will have played from... We started them at level 5 because I really do not enjoy running first and second level. I don't really enjoy running tier 1 content. And this particular group had just... we had been playing Horde of the Dragon Queen. We had gotten them up to like around level 5. And then I went, hey, do you guys want to run like a custom campaign? They went, yeah! And so we did that. But yeah, the idea that, oh no, all D&D games end, between levels 8 and level 12. Mine's level 15 right now. My other game is, I think they just hit level 9 and there's no signs of stopping. My Open Legend game, they just hit level 9 of 10 and we're on the last couple episodes. I know what I'm talking about, folks. So, in review, final thoughts. Session Zeros, really useful tool. I'm not saying that there aren't, and there's a lot of good that can be done with a Session Zero. Do not deify the idea of a Session Zero that it somehow is the be-all, end-all of running a healthy, fun D&D campaign. It's not. You can run a perfectly wonderful D&D campaign without ever having a Session Zero. And there are certain things that Session Zeros make harder. Having characters with secrets and things like that is harder with a Session Zero. 100%. Even if you go, okay, well, everyone's going to have a secret and you're only going to tell it to me, well, then everybody knows that everybody has a secret. My particular method of I individually contact every one of my players, lets them all have secrets. One of which, one of my campaigns, there's a secret since the beginning of the campaign that no one has found out. No one is. And the fun thing about it is the player themselves has actively done things to kind of hint at it, and no one is caught on. That couldn't have happened if we had a session 0 for this campaign. It just couldn't have. There's no way that this particular character could have been built with a session 0. It's not possible. So, while again, I think session 0s are great, and I think especially for new DMs, I think session 0s are a very good learning tool. However, again, I hate this idea that everybody has to have a session 0, and if you're not doing a session 0, then you're doing D&D wrong, or you're going to have an RPG horror story, or blah blah blah, or all of these different things can be prevented if you just have a session 0. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. If you hadn't noticed, I am not okay today, and so I'm very weird. But yeah, so that's what this whole rant that goes on for far too long. How long have I been? Oh, I've only been talking about this for an hour. The D&Dudes topic on it lasted for 3 minutes. So, I mean, yeah. But for those of you that have made it to the end, especially Dungeon Dudes, if you guys are still here, again, better life choices, but I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you don't take any of this personally or anything. Again, I understand the thought process that you have. I just think that you are wrong, which is perfectly fine. Being wrong is a fantastic thing. You learn from being wrong. Being right tends to be a relatively bad thing, especially when you are trying to learn, because being right will teach you the wrong things. And again, if you ever want to have an actual conversation, whether it is recorded or not, I would absolutely adore being able to talk to you both, or either one of you individually or whatever. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I think both of us have very different opinions and ideas about how Dungeons and Dragons and RPGs in general work, and I think that creates really interesting, fun conversations. So I would absolutely love to speak to you guys. Or not. Again, you are like orders of magnitude larger than me. I completely understand if you ignore the annoying dude with less than 1,000 subs. Completely understand. It's not personal. I get it. For the rest of you, I would like to know in the comments, first of all, how often you have been involved in session 0s. And your particular experiences with them, both good and bad. Have you had session 0s where you're just like, oh, this made me not want to play the game? Have you had session 0s that you're like, wow, this really got me pumped for the game? Have you been playing a campaign and gone, oh my god, I'm so glad we had a session 0? Or, crap, if we'd had a session 0, this wouldn't have happened. Let's get other people's opinions about this in here as well. So just put those in the comments. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today. I will see you guys tomorrow for the last episode of Daily December 2022. All right? Bye-bye.